Welcome back to the Sideline Live podcast. You can follow us over on Twitter and Instagram at the Sideline Live. We'd love to hear from you. On episode 98, I'm delighted to be joined by Irish senior women's international and now professional soccer player Chloe Mustaki. On this episode, we discuss her journey to become an elite level footballer, beating cancer and an ACL tear. We also discuss resilience, success, and so much more. I thoroughly enjoyed chatting with Chloe, so I hope you enjoy. Hi Chloe, thanks a million for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
You've had a massive few days since we've organised to record this. Congratulations on your latest news.
Yeah, thank you very much. A bit of a whirlwind past week, I could say. So, yeah, big change for me. Moving over to Bristol, playing full-time football, but it's all really exciting. You know, worked quite hard to get here, and as they say, the hard work really only starts now.
Brilliant. For you growing up, Chloe, was there any particular player that or coach that had a massive impact on you at any stage in your career? Kind of looking back, is there anyone you can kind of attribute anything you've achieved now to their help and their advice?
The honest answer to that is probably no. I've never really had anyone that I've looked up to massively throughout my career or so far. Every coach has been a help to me, on the way to getting to where I am today. I started off playing at Park Celtic with with the boys club, and at the time, I was the only girl playing. So, I did have a coach, Ronan Reid was his name. I actually bumped into him near my house a couple of weeks ago, and I was telling him I was chatting to Bristol City about a potential move, and he was egging me on. So, in a way, I think he's had a big impact on my career. My mum's stayed quite close to him as well over the years in terms of, just bringing him up to speed on where I'm at. So no, I think he's been great. But generally speaking, I think all my coaches have had some sort of impact on my career. But there's been no standout person, I think, to be very honest with you.
Yeah, I know for underage you would have played with the boys, and then you moved over to the women's side of things, and you joined P-Mount at a young age when the league only started. When you look at that dressing room now and look back to the players that you would have been training with and learning from at the age of 16, how big is that for younger players to be, like I had Karen Duggan on, her leadership, her physical ability as well. How big is that for a younger player to kind of play above their age group, and you see the benefits of that from your experience?
Yeah, it is massive. So yeah, when I first played for P-Mount in the first year of the Women's National League, I had the likes of Karen Duggan, Sarah Lawler, Stephanie Roach, Anya O'Gorman, all of those, massive players there to help me on my journey that was only kind of starting really at senior level. No, it's really important, and you see it even in the international setup now with Vera, for example. Like, we have a lot of young girls, Abby Larkin, 16, 17-year-old girls who are getting that experience, from a very young age. It can be a bit of a sticky situation for girls that maybe aren't ready for it. I think it's important to make sure that there's enough support around young girls so that they don't kind of, get too overwhelmed by the circumstances and by their surroundings. But I think, for the right individuals, it's massive. And then, being able to make your international debut at the age of 16, 17 is something that, you'll forever remember. So, no, it's massive. And also being able to have senior players give you that wisdom at such a young age is really important for a long career ahead.
That under-19 team you're involved with, you were captain. Talk us through that team. Obviously, the first women's side at underage level to make it to the European semi-finals. How big was that for that year group as a team? I know for yourself, obviously personally it was a little bit tricky. You weren't performing well and you underlying things going on, but how big was that for you to get to that stage of competition and kind of put Irish women's football on the map and realise we're not really just here to kind of participate, we're here to actually compete and push forward?
Yeah, definitely one of the highlights of not only my football career but my life to date, and being able to obviously captain the under-19s team to European finals was unbelievable experience. If you look at that team now, so many of the girls are still playing, maybe not football, but sport at a high level, and it shows the drive, the hunger, the competitiveness that we had amongst that cohort of girls. In that specific year. Obviously, we had some great coaches and staff around us as well. The two Dave Connell and Dave Bell, and pat me in as well. So yeah, I mean, like, obviously you have myself, Claire Shine, Katie McCabe, all of us kind of, the few of us still in and around the senior squad. Then you have Sarah Rose playing at a really high level over in Australia, AFL. And then Amy O'Connor's playing camogie for Cork, I believe. I think Megan Connolly might have been in the squad as well. She's obviously in the senior team too. So, there's a lot of us who were there. I think, something I've talked about is when you get a taste of such high competitive sport at such a young age, it really, really does help you later in life. That's something I talked about a lot about, getting through my injury troubles recently. Having had that taste of elite sport at such a young age has helped me through tough times. So yeah, it was a fantastic experience, and obviously the under 17s had done it a couple of years before that with the World Cup. So to be able to do it at another age group was momentous as well. So yeah, it's definitely a moment that will live in me forever, and I have fantastic memories from that tournament.
I'm interested that you were mentioned about the lessons you've learned from elite sport has helped you in other areas of your life on and off the pitch. Can you explain a little bit about that for the listeners who might not? For myself, I've never been involved in elite or the word high performance environment. What are those lessons that you learned, and how have they helped you moving forward from that experience?
Yeah, so in particular, when I went through my ACL rehab recently, I was out for 18 months, and there were a lot of difficult moments throughout that period of time for me, and there were moments where I really doubted whether or not I'd get back to playing football as well as I had been playing before the injury, and whether I'd get back into the senior team, whether I'd ever kind of make it semi-pro or pro. And I think having had those memories and having had such highs at a very young age, and being able to taste that level of competitive sport throughout my teenage years allowed me to kind of have that grit and that determination to get back there and to experience those things again. And I think that if I hadn't had those experiences when I was younger, I would have found it a lot more difficult to push through the tough times during my rehab. So from that perspective, I think it really did help me through my injury to have had that kind of taste of elite sport before that as well. I think a lot of athletes will say just having that resilience. You can, looking out the Euros, you have 2 players within the first few days of the tournament that have torn their ACL. I think might have been confirmed that Simone McGill has torn her ACL. Obviously Alexia Putellas tore her ACL the day before, and like, you work for months and months and months to get to a major tournament like that, and within the first 24 hours it can be taken away from you. So those girls will have learned a lot through their years of competitive sport, to be able to get them through this difficult time. So it just teaches you resilience, experiencing lows, experiencing tough times. And then as well, when I went through my Hodgkin's lymphoma, having had those moments through sport, it definitely probably did help me as well to get through that tough time.
Absolutely. That's something I wanted to touch on, was when you go from such a high captaining your country and getting to the latter stage of a tournament to come back to, as you say, you go from the really highs to the lows. As an athlete, when your identity is so wrapped up in sport, and when that identity is gone because you're not well, or even with the ACL, how does a setback or a challenge change your relationship with sport when your identity is as a sportswoman? Even though as an athlete, we try to have other areas in our life, but we spend the majority of our week training or preparing. Yeah. How does that relationship change with sport?
Yeah, I think you just touched on it there. That's something that has always kind of, in a way, worried me about going full time, and it's kind of funny talking about it now because I've just decided to do that. But I hope, over the coming months to kind of dabble in other areas, and the extra time that I have, find other outlets to keep me sane through difficult moments that I'm sure we will have throughout the season. So I think it's important to never kind of dedicate your life 100% to one thing. It's important to kind of have, as I said, other outlets, have a good support system, and be able to find enjoyment in other things, because never going to be plain sailing in one area of your life. So to be able to lean in on whether it be people or other extracurricular activities or anything like that, and that can just kind of take you away from tough times, it is really important. So yeah, I mean, that's something that I definitely will look to do. But yeah, I mean, when I went through that Hodgkin's lymphoma treatment, when I went through my ACL rehab, they were both extremely difficult moments in my life. But being able to, you know, to dabble in other areas that I had never experienced before, or to be able to spend more time with my friends or anything it may have been, it's just important to kind of find those different outlets that'll kind of distract you.
Did you ever develop a negative relationship with sport, particularly, let's say, with the injury because it was sport related? Was that ever a time, did it ever go negative for you, or what was that experience like?
It became, not really, it just became a massive mental challenge for me, particularly through my ACL rehab. Definitely mentally was a very, very tough time. Not something I've even really kind of worked, I mean, not something I've even really worked through yet, I think, at this point. Like, you talk about mental health, and growing up, I would have luckily never kind of had any mental health issues. And then you think, with my upbringing, education, everything, I've had massive support around me the whole time. And then, I get to the age of 25 and this injury, strikes in my life, and straight away, well, not straight away, but within a few months, I'm, nowhere near as mentally strong as I really thought I was. So it takes new challenges probably to grow and to get stronger. And that's what it is. It's all about failing and challenges, and being able to kind of overcome them really kind of develops you as a person. So everyone needs those, unfortunately, to be able to grow as a person. And I've had, quite big challenges already, which is good. It'll only hopefully work in my favor going forward. I think so. Yeah, but first and foremost is having the right people around you.
Absolutely. The word resilience, I think, strikes a chord with a number of different people. But for you, from all the setbacks you've had, what does that word mean to you?
It's, I've listened to a lot of podcasts over the past 2 years since my injury, and I think resilience, it's about how you react probably to something that happens to you. I guess you can't affect what happens to you throughout life to an extent, and it's not about thinking why me, woe is me. It's about how do I react, how do I bounce back from this, and it's about doing that as quickly as possible. When I tore my ACL, it wasn't, for, you have those 5-10 minutes where you cry and you try and figure out why it happened and how it happened, and then it's just about understanding, okay, well, what next? What do I need to do to get back as quickly as possible? So I think reaction is super important throughout life, and those people that react in the most positive ways to things that happen to them have a more seamless transition, throughout their lifetime. Everyone, as I said, everyone experiences tough times. How you bounce back from those.
Brilliant. You mentioned the support you have from around you, and I suppose being an athlete, it's amazing. You have this other connection with players, and you share this experience. And obviously ACL injury is unfortunately quite common, particularly for women. Is there any particular advice that you got before or during the injury that kind of stuck with you or you found really helpful? I'm just conscious that I have younger players listening. Some are injured. I get messages sometimes from players that are in the middle of big injuries. Is there anything that just really stuck with you? You kind of think back on and say, geez, that really made an impact for me on this particular day or this particular week?
To be honest, as weird as it sounds, I really took solace in the fact that I knew a lot of people who had torn their ACL before and were back playing to, their absolute best. I mean, I take Brianna Jarrett as an example. When I tore my ACL, she was, flying at Brighton at the time, and she had torn her ACL, I think, 3 times at that point. And look at her, she was in the form of her life. And doing fantastic things over in WSL, killing it with the Irish team. And I think I look to people like her to feel like, if they can do it, there's no reason why I can't do it. So that was the kind of my first reaction. I guess when you're going through a difficult time like that, you also need to realize that it's about making the most of it. So while I had to take time out of competitive sport, it was an opportunity for me to work on myself in ways that I never had the time to before. So not just from a physical component, but obviously mainly from a physical component, working on those small details that, when you're in a team environment, you just don't have the time to do on an individual basis really as much. So, being able to work on certain muscle groups or anything like that I wasn't able to do before, and just making the most of it and making sure that when I got back and when my knee was ready to play competitive sport again, that I was in the best physical shape that I really could be. So that's probably what I would say mostly, is just making the most of the time out that you have, and not seeing it as lost time. Because if you put in the extra work when you're on the sidelines, you'll reap the rewards on the other side.
That's a great way of looking at it. I was interested as well, you spent a bit of time as a pundit. How did you find being on that side of things, looking at the game from a different angle, analysing it, not even just to discuss the game, but for yourself? Was there anything you kind of learned from that experience? I suppose I'm currently going through a big injury, kind of the latter stages of it, and I've started coaching, and it's like you get this 360 view of the sport that you're so used to only having that 180 on the pitch view. Was there any moment that you had that realisation, or was there anything you picked up on from your time watching the game from a different angle?
Honestly, not particularly. I mean, for me, the biggest thing that I got out of punditry was being able to continue being involved with the sport indirectly as such. So that was massive for me, just from a mental perspective, being able to still watch on, specifically the international team, being able to somewhat be involved in the hype. And that was so important to me for a mental perspective. I think, I guess having, looking on the game from the stands as such, although it was the studio, was beneficial as well to an extent. I mean, something that I haven't done much of at this point, because I have been playing at it mostly at an amateur level, is kind of video analysis and looking at it from a broader perspective. So that was really interesting for me, and understanding kind of phases of play and looking at formations and everything like that. So that was an insight into the game that I'd never really had before, and mostly because I was working full time, I was training, and I just didn't have the time to put into kind of analysis. And obviously that's something that I'll be able to do a bit more this season now. But no, not really. Kind of was more so for me just being able to stay involved in the international setup to an extent while I was injured.
I want to ask you about that. How during the Women's National League, how do you balance playing a very high level of football with huge commitments as well as full-time work and all the travelling? And it must have been mentally and physically draining.
Yeah, it was exhausting. I talked to some of my friends in Ireland who do it as well, and it's really tough. And I've openly said before, when I was living in London and playing for Charlton, I was working full time and I was getting the tube a few hours a day and I was traveling. I have no doubt in my mind that was a massive contributing factor to tearing my ACL. Your body is not conditioned to sleep 6 hours a night, work a full day, travel 2 to 3 hours a day, and then push itself on a pitch for 2.5 hours, or gym pitch, whatever. So it was extremely difficult. The past, since starting that back in 2019, it's been a really difficult few years for me. Obviously I went through my ACL rehab, but I was still working full time. I was still pushing myself in the gym. So to be honest, to be able to just take a step out of full-time employment as of last month, and now be able to dedicate myself to football, is an incredible feeling. I just don't think it's healthy for anyone to be doing that. Unfortunately, it's still a necessary process for a lot of females and males, but particularly females, when the sport is not as developed. Financially, we need to be able to live. So I wouldn't recommend doing it for a prolonged period of time. As I said, I think it was a massive contributing factor to me tearing my ACL, but needs must, and sometimes it's the only way for to be able to get to where you want to go.
From your experience of playing abroad, is there anything that they do particularly well over there that the Women's National League can adopt, and particularly from an angle of developing players to have the opportunity to go abroad? We've mentioned some of the younger players, the talented under 17 and under 19 teams. Is there anything that you've seen that you'd like to see the league implement to help create this new path for professional players so they don't have to go through that process that you went through and you attribute now to your ACL injury?
Yeah, well, a lot of what other European countries are doing is that they're mixing kind of education and football together. So there's a lot of countries, the likes of France, for example, where the girls are living together and going to school together and training together in the afternoon. So the girls will go to class in the mornings from whatever it may be, 9 to 12, and they'll have lunch together and then they'll train together in the afternoons. And obviously, to an extent, their education is tailored, but they still come out, the other end with, leaving cert, GCSEs, a degree, and have, from a football perspective, are fantastic players. So that's ultimately where we need to get to. I think we're a long way away from that in Ireland. At the moment, what we really need in Ireland is just kind of more resources, and we need kind of better monitoring, better S&C, better resources, better everything, from even just training in the evenings, and then we need to look to kind of combining the two in a few years' time. But yeah, we really just need resources so that everyone is kind of doing the right training, because right now everyone is doing their own training, showing up, doing an hour and a half on the pitch a few times a week, and it's just not enough, unfortunately. So yeah, we just need more resources, which hopefully will come in the coming years.
Absolutely. When you get to such an elite level of sport, I know you're a fan of the High Performance podcast, and something they reference was Worldclass basics. Is that something that you've kind of seen from your time? Is when you get to such an elite level, say the Irish senior women's team, do you practice the basics, or is it just something that everybody just has at that point?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, before training, you talk about basics before training, just doing some prehab work. I mean, it might seem insignificant, but it absolutely isn't. Even from a mental perspective, knowing that you've got your muscles primed to train at a high level is massive. And a lot of things are physical, but a lot of things are mental as well. So yeah, just making sure you get there early, do your stretching, do your foam roll, and do your band work. All those little things, just doing them daily, make a massive difference in the end. So, and that's something that I definitely practice every day before training, and the girls do it here as well at Bristol, and all the top sides do it. So, and it's about doing something kind of consistently, maybe small, but just doing it every day, and at the end, it's a big leap.
Is there any particular underrated skill or attribute you see in the game at the moment that maybe coaches or younger players or anyone in general is just maybe overlooking from your perspective? Is there anything that just stands out?
I think it probably just would be that. It would be just consistency. It's all about consistency, unfortunately. So you have to have the dedication to do things day in, day out. And it doesn't have to be massive, massive gestures or anything like that. It's just small little things that you chip away at every day, and at the end will make a big difference. And as well, it's about showing up when you don't want to show up. I mean, everyone has bad days. Everyone has days where they don't want to go to work, where they don't want to train, even full-time athletes. But it's about showing up on the bad days and doing something, and every little helps. So yeah, I think it's just about being consistent and being disciplined, which is easier said than done. But even on the bad days, just showing up to the gym or showing up to training and giving it what you can, even if it's 20% less than it was yesterday, it's adding something to the bank.
Can you give us a bit of an insight into the Irish senior women's setup, the professionalism, the what the players bring to it? Give us a bit of an insight that I would never be able to get an insight into, and how professional is this team, and what have you learned from the other players involved?
Yeah, I think, well, I'll answer it to the best of my ability. I think some of the senior girls now, the likes of Louise Quinn, or Rusha, or any of the girls who have been in and around the squad for a long time, would have a better perspective, just because I think the professionalism within the women's sport has come on massively in the past kind of 5 years. I've obviously only been involved for the past couple of years, but 95% of the girls now are full-time, are all in full-time setups, in loads of different countries. So everyone brings their own experience and their own professionalism, and that's fantastic to see how everyone does it differently, so the setup is fantastic at the moment. The competitiveness is unbelievable. I mean, the standard of training is really, fantastic. When we go into camp, like, everyone is given 100%, and you never really know who's going to start, coming into camp. even though, a set of 11 have started in the previous competitive game, there could be, 2-3 changes at least for the upcoming game. It's just about who's performing. And so it just goes to show that, everyone is working hard in training, which is fantastic because it brings up the level, and then it brings up the level for all of us going back into our clubs then after. So no, but I think just the fact that everyone is almost everyone in the squad now is full time is massive, and it brings a lot of kind of competitiveness, but also professionalism day in, day out in terms of how we train and how we carry ourselves around camp.
Is that competitiveness the big difference between kind of the club level to international level, or is the full-time professionalism that's also attributing to that as well?
I think it's just the standard of the game. Everyone is playing. Also, the fact everyone's playing in different countries, everyone brings something different to the team when they show up to camp. Whether it be slightly more kind of athletic or slightly more that technical ability, the likes of Denise O'Sullivan. Everyone just brings a different spark to the session, and we all learn from each other. So it's great. We're not all playing in the same league. And as I said, between technical ability, physical ability, tactical ability, we all bring different things to the team.
When you get to that level, is sport more physical, mental, tactical? What is the kind of the biggest pillar of all of those factors you've just mentioned?
Yeah, I think definitely the biggest pillar would still have to be the kind of physical aspect. You need to be able to play a 90-minute game at a high intense level. So your recovery rate, something that Vera goes on a lot about, your recovery rate needs to be very, very good. So you need to be able to kind of run, a 100-yard burst or whatever it may be, take, a 10-second break and then do it again. So that's definitely the biggest pillar, I think, at international level, is being able to do that over and over again for 90 minutes. I think the mental aspect does come into it a lot more than what people think. For example, like coming into the Irish setup, being able to be okay with, one day starting and then the next day not starting, and just being able to be your teammates' number one fan. That's really, really important, and that's about being professional about it and wanting the best for everyone. So I think, of course, physical aspect is massive when it gets to this level, but also mentally, just being confident when you're with yourself and your ability, but then being respectful of others and understanding that fantastic players around you and everyone wants the best for each other. Like,
that's kind of come up a couple of times in episodes, that you're so selfish in the individual preparation, and you don't go out drinking, you don't, let's say your non-football friends, you're probably, sports people have to be selfish to get to where they want to go to, let's say, to represent their country. But then when you get to the point of representing your country, you can't be selfish, because then it's about the team, it's about the unit, it's not about you as the individual.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're all, as elite athletes, we're all super, super competitive with ourselves, which is great, obviously, because it has allowed us to get to where we are today. But then, being able to take a step back when you get in, into the international camp and set up, and wanting the best for everyone and wanting the best for the team and for the nation, and just wearing the badge with pride and understanding that, like I said, the standard of women's football is growing so fast, and to understand that there's thousands and thousands of players just like yourself who deserve the opportunity to play too. So look, as I said, it's just fantastic to be involved in that team, and especially with the standard at the moment, it's a privilege. So whether or not you play, it's just about taking on the chin and wanting the best for those around you, wanting the best for the team.
Speaking of playing, can you describe what it was like to get back and to represent your country after all of the setbacks you've just talked through? And I can see the smile already on your face.
Yeah, I've had a surreal kind of past 6 months, really. To think that, it's the 11th of July today, I wasn't even back playing competitive football this time last year.
Wow.
I think my first game back for Shells was kind of around the 20th of August, so in about 5 weeks' time. So how, what a difference a year can make, is massive. So, it's been an unbelievable year for me. As I've said on social media, like, I thank Shells a lot for the support that they've shown me, in getting back onto the pitch last season and supporting me through, the last few months of the season. And then, yeah, I mean, I have a lot to thank myself for too, I think, and it's important to recognize too, and, put in so much hard work throughout that ACL rehab, and waiting for my knee to be ready, and trying to, as I said, work on those little things that maybe I never had the time to work on before, and so that when I did come out the other side of the ACL rehab, that, my body would be kind of in a good place. So yeah, no, and look, obviously Vera gave me the opportunity to come in La Manga camp back in February, when Niamh Farley had to pull out. So, that was an opportunity for me to come in and show how hungry I was and how determined I was to kind of stay within the setup going forward. And luckily that's been the case so far. As I said, that may not be the case the next camp. The standard is growing all the time. There's so many girls who deserve the opportunity. So I'm very thankful I have been involved since then. But the hard work continues, and you have to kind of prove that you deserve to be in there every single time. But no, look, it's been an unbelievable 6 months in particular for me, and long may that continue. Obviously now I'm in a full-time setup, which hopefully will give me a better chance to kind of be a consistent player within the senior team, and that's all I can hope for, really.
Absolutely. After your debut, obviously people texting you, kind of acknowledging what you've done from their perspectives, but was there a moment where you kind of were sitting by yourself and you said, you kind of acknowledged everything you've gone through and just said, I did it, like I actually got through it all, and I've reached where I've wanted to go?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, playing against Sweden was a dream come true, in in a competitive game in a massive stadium with whatever it was, 10,000 people watching us live on TV. It was unbelievable experience. As I said, I'd only got back playing about 7 months before that, and here I was making my competitive debut against world number 2. So it was unbelievable. I think the moment of realization for me came probably more so against Russia in La Manga. That was my first cap as such at senior level, and that was something that I really, really just worked so hard to get to after everything, the Hodgkin's lymphoma, the ACL rehab, and making sure that I got my undergrad, making sure that I got my master's, making sure that I got my work experience in, taking off all those personal boxes for myself. I'm not saying everyone needs to do that at all, but that was what I wanted to do, and then still come out the other end and get that senior cap was unbelievable. I played 90 minutes, got player of the match. Like, it was a dream first cap for me, albeit not a competitive cap. It was unbelievable, and then to be able to go on kind of 2 months later and get my first competitive cap against world number 2 was unbelievable. So yeah, as I said, I have so many people to thank for on my journey, but I also have to be proud in the sense that I put in so much hard work over the years to get there, and I can only hope that there's more to come.
I recently interviewed Tom Elms, and we spoke about that Sweden game, and he said we were brought back to reality fairly quickly coming home. But for Irish football, and for women's football in particular, how big of a result is that game? Do you think this is kind of don't want to say monumental moment, but how big is that world number 2 to come out with that performance? Is this kind of the start for this team moving forward? Was that kind of the benchmark that you realise, look, we're actually really at this point? Because maybe last year, maybe there was questions that you were, but I think, did that performance for you as a team kind of help you realise that we're actually really here and at this level?
Yeah, I think so. It definitely showed that we're getting closer anyway. I think anyone watching that game will see that, we had our backs to the wall for most of the game. So in terms of it being a real even game, I don't think anyone can say that. I think we defended, exceptionally well. And obviously we scored a fantastic goal, good combination play between Megan and Katie. So we have it within the team. It's just, we're just a few years behind those big nations. And I think, you ask that question again in maybe even 3 years' time, I'm sure I'd be 100% agreeing with you. So we're definitely edging closer and closer. Of course, being able to do that away from home as well was massive. So I think we definitely have it. We're just a few years behind, and I don't think we're quite there yet, but we're definitely on the right track. And as I said, having the more resources now, having equal pay, having nearly everyone in the squad going full time, is massive. And I think if you look at those big nations, all of the girls are playing full time, and all of the girls financially are pretty secure and able to give 100% to their football, which we haven't been in that position for until maybe kind of, we're not even quite there, I'd say, yet, but we're only arriving at that stage now. So
okay, as a player, I've kind of spoken with other guests about this, but not only from the financial backing, but for yourselves to get someone like Sky on board and to see the country come back and support players. How is that for you as a player, just to see that support for yourself and know they're coming to support us and they're supporting me, and not only financially but to even the attendances and the games and the live coverage for women in sport? What is that like?
Oh, it's been fantastic. Like, it's been unbelievable, really. Like, it really does give us that extra 5% when you're playing, and when you're getting ready for games, just that excitement building. It People don't think it makes a massive difference, but it really does. And I mean, you talk to some of the professional, even male players who played in empty stadiums during the pandemic, and the effect that had on them. So if you think about us, who are used to always having empty stadiums, and then now we're starting to kind of fill up stadiums, and what that brings to us, the confidence levels and the excitement, and we deserve that. And it's definitely that extra 5%. I mean, people kind of say that off the cuff, but it definitely is true. And it does kind of get us over the line in the dying moments of the game or whatever. So no, it's massive, and long may it continue, and hopefully kind of will continue to grow, not only in soccer but in other sports as well, and for women.
For you, Chloe, where do you get your confidence from? Is it, so was there anything kind of maybe coming after the injury? Did you suffer with that, or is there any sort of not routines, but more exercises or anything you just find great comfort in and kind of building your confidence as a footballer?
Probably something that I have struggled with throughout my own career, and that confidence on the pitch. I mean, I spoke to someone about it, actually had a couple of sessions with someone when I was getting back playing this time last year, about kind of trying to regain that confidence as a player, and I kind of openly would say that. I don't know. I think it's probably something that will come naturally now with going full time. I think confidence comes from the work that you've put in. So when people ask me a lot, like, mentally, how do you feel about getting back playing post ACL? Do you have worries about tearing it again? Of course, it'll always be a worry, but I never worried about getting on the pitch, going into tackles or anything like that. I never really worried about that, because I knew I'd put in the rehab. I knew I'd put in the hours to feel confident about my knee, my leg, going into competitive sport again. So I think confidence comes from putting in the hours. And I think when you've been training at a high level day in, day out, you can probably go into international camp, for example, knowing that you're in a good place. I think I've only kind of started feeling that way through the hours that I put into my ACL rehab, but being a bit more professional over the past couple of years, having more time to put into my athletic side, because I wasn't able really to do that through my education, and I was working. But now I had the time through my ACL rehab, and now I have the time, hopefully, at Bristol. So I think my confidence will just grow naturally from having more hours put into football.
Goal setting, I suppose, was that ever something you did, maybe particularly during the injury, kind of sit down with yourself and kind of not map out, but kind of just sit down and say, look, in 5 years, by the end of my career, because sport unfortunately doesn't last forever,
Yeah.
I want to achieve X, Y, and Z? Was that something that you would have done, particularly maybe during the injury or coming back from it?
Yeah. So when I spoke to that, and I had a couple of sessions with that individual about kind of building confidence and getting back on the pitch, we definitely set goals for myself. Obviously the first goal was getting back playing. The second goal, I think, was getting into the starting 11 at Shelbourne. And then, following on from that, the goal was to get back into the international setup, and then the ultimate goal really was to get my first senior cap. So 100%, it's not something that I've really done up until a year ago. I never really set goals, because I think you can only do your best. I think it's important to have kind of small goals, but generally speaking, it's just not something I've ever really done until getting back from my ACL rehab. But yeah, that's 100%, you're bang on the money. That's something that I did a year ago, and luckily I managed to reach those goals. But I don't like setting, very difficult goals on myself, because I think life is hard enough and everyone's doing their best, and you just got to roll with the punches and roll with the highs and the lows. So yeah, that's kind of how things have been for me.
I love that, because I find sometimes when players set goals on themselves, and because like it's not like sport is it's not kind of linear, like it's completely,
Yeah,
it's those kind of graphs that go up and down, up and down. When you set a goal and you don't reach it, it's like no matter anything else you could have done, it's just because you didn't achieve this one particular thing you wrote down that
yeah,
you're a
exactly.
failure nearly.
Then you see it as a failure, and it's not a failure, it's just life getting in the way. And I think it's tough setting goals, for sure. I just think you need to be kind to yourself, and you just need to make sure that you're chipping away at something every single day. And as I said, some days you'll make a bigger leap than others, but as long as you're doing something every day, that's the most important thing.
It's one of my favorite questions. I think you have a good answer in this. No pressure or anything. What would be your definition of success? Or not, maybe definition is maybe too strong a word, but is there anything that, like, how do you measure success from everything you've gone through? Is there anything, just for you, what's your experience and kind of personal, kind of, I don't know how to say it, but your definition of success without being a definition?
God, that's a very difficult question. I think success is probably being happy to an extent, being content in maybe a few different aspects of life. I think if you're succeeding 100% at one area of your life, is it really success if you're not, if you're not happy in your relationship, if you're torn up about the relationships you have with your family, or you feel like you don't have friends to lean on, or I don't know. I think I never really look at success as being kind of the end goal for one thing. I think, especially with the mental health crisis at the moment, it's important to make sure that you're making progress. And for me, success is probably just making progress day to day, in a few different aspects of your life. So are you continuing to develop relationships with your friends? Are you continuing to work on your S&C for club? Are you continuing to, visit your granny on a Sunday or whatever it may be? I think it's just, continuing to make steps forward week on week in a couple of different aspects of your life. For me, that's just being successful. There's no end goal, because when you reach that end goal, then it's kind of like asking yourself what next. So I mean, when I caught up with that individual that I had a few sessions with after my first competitive cap against Sweden, and he's like, so how do you feel now? You've reached that goal. How do you feel now? And I said, yeah, I feel happy, but I still, I definitely could be happier, and I definitely feel like, okay, well, I feel tired now because now I need to kind of set another goal, or now I've got more to work towards. And there never is an end goal. There, as Matthew McConaughey says, there is no yet, because you're just going to continuously have to work towards something else. So I think success is just making progress day in, day out, and don't focus on one single thing. Make sure you kind of have different areas of your life to kind of improve on, because sometimes life gets in the way, and certain aspects of your life will get tougher than others.
I love that answer, and that's something a lot of Olympians speak about. It's like they train their whole life for this 3-week event, and then the 3 weeks go by, and you're like,
What do I do now?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, as sports people, it is very difficult. Like, we train our whole lives for these, like, even let's say for the women, the under-19 tournament, you train your whole life for this moment. And even the girls that just under ACL train their whole life to represent the country and go to the Euros, and then it's gone in a split second.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so life is crazy, and I just don't take anything too seriously, and just keep working away and keep making progress every day in some aspect.
Exactly. Speaking of making progress, you're signed a professional contract with Bristol City. Talk us through that opportunity. Obviously, what did you look for in a team, and how excited are you to sign with them and start with the season with Bristol?
Yeah, I'm so excited. I've had my first couple of sessions now last week, back to it tomorrow, so I'm looking forward to it already. I'm looking forward to maybe seeing how much my game can grow. Obviously, I've been balancing football and education and work my whole life, so I'm excited to see how much my game can grow. I'm excited to kind of give myself a break as well. As selfish as that may sound, I've had such a tough time, I think, balancing the two to kind of a high level over the past few years. So, to be able to be given that opportunity to focus, not solely because I never want to be kind of wholeheartedly focused on one thing, but to give football my all, which I haven't been able to do, is an exciting prospect for me. Never something that I really dreamt of, to be frankly honest, and maybe that's a very different answer to what you'd expect. But for me, growing up, my dream was never really to be a professional football player. But I think when I tore my ACL and the work that I put in to get back, it kind of made me feel as if I owed it to myself to give full-time football a bash and kind of see how much my game could rise and could develop, just solely focusing kind of on that to an extent. So I'm excited to do that. I'm excited to develop more relationships with people in a new country. I love doing that. I spent a year in Bordeaux, I spent a semester in Lisbon, and developing networks in different countries is something that I enjoy doing as well, being kind of from a multinational background. So there's a lot of pros that come from moving away as a professional football player. So I'm really, really excited to explore all of those, not just on the field. But of course, that is the main reason that I'm here. So no, it's massively exciting. The club facilities are fantastic. The people are so lovely. So far anyway, for sure, and I'm sure that will continue. So both the staff and the players have been so welcoming and nice to me. So I think that was the main thing for me, making such a big lifestyle change for me. The most important thing for me was to find a club where I could feel comfortable being away from home. And I think that is another aspect of, kind of going full time. Something that scared me about doing that was dedicating my life to one thing. And that's something that I've never really done before. I've always liked having kind of, as I said, dabbling in a few other areas to make sure that, if one didn't go particularly well, I was still being able to kind of plunge myself into another one. So that's something I hope to be able to do now once I'm fully settled, is, start to learn how to cook better, start to maybe do some volunteering, start to get back to art. I loved to art growing up. So just making sure that I can find other outlets when there'll be days, as I said, there'll be losses that will be tough to take throughout the season and stuff, and making sure that I can bounce back from them, not only on the field, but also outside from a mental perspective.
What do you think you're going to bring to the team from all, your experiences at every level, and what do you think you're going to bring to that squad, and not only on the pitch, but off the pitch?
Yeah, hopefully on the pitch I can bring quality as well. I mean, the standard is fantastic here. Hopefully I can bring my own quality as well. It'll be a fight, for the starting 11, but that's what you want in order to improve. I think off the pitch I'll bring, a lot of experience from what I've gone throughout life. I think we've quite a young team here at Bristol. I think I'm actually the second oldest, and I'm only turning 27 at the end of the month, so that's a bit crazy to say, but so I guess just bringing experience from my life, and experience from, as I said, living in different countries and different perspectives will hopefully be something that will be well received in the team. And I think that's a reason why, when I was speaking to Lauren, that the manager, she saw that in me, and that's what they were looking for, to bring on some quality players, but experienced players, and kind of a few more older individuals that could bring that outside experience to the team.
Something you mentioned there earlier was podcasts, and I know you listened to the High Performance podcast. Is there anything in particular you've learned from those guests, from Jake and Damien, from the lessons they've discussed and the values that their guests bring? Is there anything that just stand out for you from listening to that show?
Yeah, God, so many. I mean, when I was going through my rehab and during the pandemic, all I was doing was kind of walking, and because I couldn't run for a lot of the period of time, and I was just walking a lot and listening. So many. But I think the main one I've already touched on is, it's you can't affect what happens to you, but it's your responsibility to be able to react accordingly. So I think that's the main thing that I've learned from listening to that podcast, is all these successful people that go on that podcast have failed numerous times or have gone through such difficult periods throughout their life. But what's allowed them to finally reach a certain level of success is how they've responded from those difficult times. And that's the main thing, is just, it's your responsibility to react accordingly and to react in a positive manner when something negative as such happens to you. So that's probably the biggest lesson that I've learned from listening to that podcast.
Okay, very good. Everyone can go listen to that podcast after you listen to all of my episodes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna move on to the Sideline 7. It's the same 7 questions at the end of every episode. Question 1, what is your favourite quote?
I have a quote in my Twitter bio, and it says, "It's not the world against you; it's just you against yourself." And I think that's a fantastic quote for, especially for someone like me. I'm more competitive with myself than I am with other people. Probably not something I should openly say, given I am in a team sport. But anyway, you know, sometimes it can be easy to think that oh, woe is me, and why is this happening to me, and you know, this isn't happening to all these other individuals who are thriving. At the end of the day, you don't know what's happening behind closed doors, and at the end of the day, the biggest competition is just with yourself, and it's just about being honest and open with yourself and working towards your own personal goals. And the world, no one is against you. No one cares enough in this day and age about other people. They only care about themselves. So just keep working on yourself and stop thinking the world is against you, and just react positively to, as I said, to negative events.
Brilliant, love that. Question 2, what's the best sporting event you've been to? And you can pick one as a fan and one as a player.
Oh, as a player, I'd say definitely the World University Games. I was lucky enough to go to two of those, one in Taipei and one in Naples, and they're just unbelievable events. They're essentially like a mini Olympics. So as a player, they were kind of fantastic experiences for me. Just to be able to kind of see how these big events unfold. So for sure, they'd probably be top of my list. As a fan, can you believe it? I haven't really been to that many big games really. So I don't really have a standout moment as a fan yet. Although, you know, having been to some of the Ireland senior women's games when I was out injured were kind of big moments for me, and obviously I was their biggest fan when I wasn't on the pitch. So
Is there anything on your kind of sporting bucket list that you'd love to go see, like a particular event, or it doesn't have to be football, any particular sporting event?
I'd love to. Well, just speaking, I'd love to go to Wimbledon. Um, yeah, tennis. Tennis was kind of big in my life up until about 14 years of age. I was really kind of dual playing the two sports, and kind of had to pick at a certain point just because I'd kind of broken into the Irish underage setup, and with education and everything was all getting a bit too much. But you know, I played tennis to a high level when I was younger, so I would love to go to Wimbledon and see that live for sure.
Question 3, we've spoken about it this already, but the biggest setback or challenge so far in your career, and how did you react to it?
Yeah, definitely the ACL. Although it's probably difficult for people to understand that, because obviously I went through cancer treatment, which is a massive kind of lifestyle change for someone like myself, competitive athlete. But luckily, in my case, it was a very treatable cancer, and the process was quite straightforward in the sense that, you know, the 6 months of treatment, I would be in every second week for a full day of chemo, and all going well. In most cases, I'd come out the other side being okay, and touch wood, that has been the case, and hopefully it will continue. But with the ACL rehab, it was, although it was predetermined in the sense that, look, this is what you do, you get your surgery, you know, this is what you do in phase 1, this is what you do in phase 2. It was so kind of different experience for me than what I expected before. You know, I had a lot of troubles in terms of my rehab. My knee was so cranky, and I found that process, it was a long process as well. It was 18 months versus kind of what 6 months of chemo. So it was such a long process for me, and mentally it was extremely difficult. So they each had their challenges, but I think overall, and maybe I'm biased because the ACL has been more recent than the chemo treatment, so that does probably play a factor. But yeah, mentally, I was in the depths at some point, different points in my ACL rehab. So definitely that.
Mm-hmm. The 4th question then, kind of on the flip side, what's been your biggest achievement on or off the pitch?
Um, Honestly, I think getting back from my ACL rehab is probably the one of the proudest moments for me to date. As I said, I went through such a difficult time mentally, and I went to, you know, to dark places in my head throughout that ACL rehab that I never thought I would. So, you know, just getting back on the pitch and getting my first senior cap after everything, is probably my proudest moment to date.
Brilliant. Looking back, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it earlier, probably just not to take anything too seriously. Just don't take the losses too seriously, don't take the successes too seriously. Um, just enjoy life day to day as much as possible. And yeah, just, don't put too much pressure on yourself in any kind of aspect of life.
Mm-hmm. Question 6, who would be your dream dinner guest and why? You can open up the table to a few people if you want.
Coming back to kind of listening to podcasts, another podcast that I've recently started to listen to is the Feel Better Live More podcast.
Okay.
Dr. Ranjan Chatterjee, I can't really pronounce his
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I kind of just stumbled across it and I listened to a specific guest a couple of months ago. Actually, it was on the way to Sweden with the Irish team. I downloaded this podcast for the plane ride, and it's Edith Eger. Don't know if you've heard of her. She is a Holocaust survivor, and
oh wow,
I was honestly like, I'd never heard of her before, and I was listening to the podcast on the plane, and I was literally tears like going down my face listening to it, and I was like hoping no one would see me. But she's just from that hour and a half of listening to her speak was without a doubt one of the most phenomenal people I'd ever listened to in my life. Yeah, as I said, she's a Holocaust survivor. She talks about her outlook on life. And specifically kind of while she was in Auschwitz and how she kind of got through that. I think she wrote a book called The Choice, which I still need to get around to reading. But she's an unbelievable person. I think we've a lot to learn from individuals like that, and they're so forgiving, and how your outlook on life can just help you get through such difficult times. So yeah, I'd love to have dinner with her and just listen to her speak for a couple of hours.
Wow, I'm going to download that this afternoon for my
honestly, you won't regret it. It was one of the most enjoyable listens, and it's a difficult listen. Like, it's definitely a difficult listen, but it's unbelievable. Yeah, let me know what you think of it after.
Yeah, deadly, will do. Final question before I let you go. If your life was a book, what chapter would this be called?
New beginnings, probably. Yeah, new beginnings after everything I've been through over the past kind of, well, since my diagnosis for Hodgkin's lymphoma in 2014, so what's that, kind of 8 years? It's been a bit of a roller coaster for me, and to finally kind of sign my first professional contract, walk away from a full-time job and being able to kind of do what I love is an absolute privilege. So yeah, I'm looking forward to what the next 9 months hold with Bristol City, and yeah, probably new beginnings. Yeah, so I'm excited.
I'm going to cheat with this one. I actually want to add another question in. If I was to go back to this time last year and talk to you and say, and kind of go back in time, say, look, for the next year, you're at this stage, you're not even back to football, and say you're going to achieve all of this.
Yeah.
What would you have said to me?
Oh, just giving me goosebumps there. I'd say, well,
would you have believed me?
No, I wouldn't have. To be honest, the biggest thing for me is signing a professional contract. I mean, it's, as I said, it's never something that I dreamt of. I've really kind of spent much time thinking about, and now kind of, 10 months post getting back to playing, I've signed my first professional contract with, a really ambitious club, hopefully a club that will be pushing for promotion to WSL. So to think that I could be playing hopefully in the WSL in a year's time is fantastic, considering where I was just 12 months ago. So no, it's not something I've really thought about, but yeah, it is pretty crazy, and yeah, I have a lot to be proud of, given the hard work I've put in, but a lot to thank other people for as well, for supporting me.
Brilliant. Look, Chloe, thanks a million for joining me on the podcast, and I just want to wish you the best of luck with everything on and off the pitch. I'm looking forward to seeing how you fill your time as a professional player with all these with all the cooking and everything you do.
Yeah, definitely come back to me in a couple of weeks, because I need someone to put the pressure on me so that I don't just end up like a bum and not making the most of my time. So I can hopefully fill you in on some things in a few weeks. But yeah, thank you very much for having me on, and thank you, for everything that you do as well, as a podcaster and developing women's sport as well. We really appreciate that. So thanks for that.
A massive thank you to Chloe for joining me on the podcast today. I thoroughly enjoyed our chat, and I hope you got something from it. I'll be sure to leave all of our social media links in the description box below, and I just want to wish her the very best of luck moving forward. If you are enjoying the podcast, please do leave a rating and a review over on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as it does help the show grow. Massive thank you for all your support to date. Be sure to follow us over on Instagram at The Sideline Live for more.